Hello, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Wright-Beglia, and I am the Alumni Development Program Specialist. I'm joined tonight by Ellen Donovan, combined your name there, and Christopher Arima. Welcome to Beyond the Books, Exploring Criminal Justice Careers for Liberal Arts Graduates. We're so excited for tonight's event. Tonight's event will be led by Excelsior alumnus, current Alumni Leadership Council Secretary, veteran, and attorney with the New Mexico Law Offices of the Public Defender, Christopher Arima. Before we begin, just a little housekeeping, some general housekeeping. I'd just like to ask everyone to hold any questions that they may have, any burning questions that you've got going for the end of the presentation. It just makes it easier for me to be able to track all of that. We will take 15 to 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A section. So at that time, Ellen and I will direct your questions, whether they're in the chat or the Q&A, to Chris. We'll kind of chime in too, and we'll all have a great conversation. So we appreciate you waiting and being patient. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Chris. But again, I'm so happy that you're all here with us tonight. I'm going to get our presentation going. But while I'm going, I'm sure Chris is happy to introduce himself. So thank you so much.
And thanks, Mackenzie. Everyone, my name is Chris Arima. Just as a quick correction, I used to be a criminal defense attorney. I just recently switched into medical malpractice defense. But I also think that that's a really good segue into pivoting, which I'm going to hit on later, because I know people are thinking, hey, I have this experience in criminal justice, or I have this experience in the financial sector. And I want to talk about how your experience in a nexus with your liberal arts degree can really help you transition into career fields that you might not think are actually related to each other, when in fact they're closely tied, and that bridge will be your liberal arts degree. But this is our presentation. This is Beyond the Books, Exploring Criminal Justice Careers for Liberal Arts Graduates. Like I stated, I was a criminal defense attorney and public defender. I graduated from the Syracuse College of Law in 2022 with my Juris Doctor. I'm barred in New York. I originally practiced in international arbitration in the energy sector for a year prior to moving out and establishing a practice in criminal defense in New Mexico. After practicing in criminal defense, I transitioned into medical malpractice defense, where now I represent doctors, nurses, dentists in any cases, both administratively through their board certification process, as well as any lawsuits that might arise from their practice. But if we want, we can switch slides and go into the first slide. Here, let me pull up my. Liberal arts and critical skills. These are skills I kind of wanted to hit on. They're going to be associated with a liberal arts degree. When I talk about these skills, I want you to think about them from the perspective of viewing your resume. How can you've built these skills and you've earned these skills through establishing yourself at Excelsior University and enrolling and completing the liberal arts program. So how do we actually integrate these skills into making ourselves more marketable, right? Both in the criminal justice space and the other spaces that we might want to pivot to. So regarding, skills associated with liberal arts degree, I want to start on critical thinking, right? Where you're allowed to develop strong analytical and problem solving skills and enables you to tackle complex problems and issues from different angles. This is really, really critical, especially in such a global market that we have now, where everything touches on each other. You could have an issue that at its core is a criminal issue, but really you're touching on, let's say, addiction through the fentanyl crisis, which means that you're going to be hitting on a lot of stuff that actually goes into the science of addiction, the treatment of addiction, and then how first line responders deal with addiction. And that comes from a science and health and even a nursing background. And so having a liberal arts degree is really important to actually establish that critical thinking skills and seeing all of the areas that can touch on a particular issue. And then how do we kind of, communicate these issues, right? And this comes from both writing and verbal expression. I'm going to tell you right now, there is no degree better than a liberal arts degree to actually develop that writing, which in my opinion is the most important and critical skill in the marketplace. Can you write effectively? Can you write precisely? Can you write persuasively? And a liberal arts degree really enhances this. And so I challenge each one of you to look at your liberal arts degree and establish a portfolio of your writing. Look at it and even send it to people in your networks. You can send it to me and go over your writing and figure out, where are my strengths here? And then how can I relay those strengths to the market? And so that's why writing skills is just so important. Interdisciplinary knowledge, you're going to get exposure to a lot of diverse subjects. It fosters a broader, understanding of the world and encourages adaptability and creativity. I've had my fair share of interviews and my fair share of getting involved in different, enterprises and different fields. And that adaptability is really, really important and critical. And you get that from a liberal arts degree because you might be taking a, course on the historical development of warfare, and then the next minute you're taking a course on, the intersection with diversity in business. These are things that actually really help you in the marketplace to be able to look at these things from various angles and find solutions. I'd also want to hit on civic engagement. You get to focus on ethics, history, and culture. It just helps you become more informed, active citizens. You contribute positively to your community, and you do it from a basis of knowledge and curiosity. And that's something that's really important with a liberal arts degree. And I heard someone mention earlier about, you think about pivoting your career, and career flexibility is huge. As I stated earlier, I was in criminal defense, but I got a ton of exposure in criminal defense towards the medical field. A lot of our cases arose from addiction. They arose in the context of hospital care. And I found that there was this passion, this inkling in me, even the skill that I developed for getting really engaged in the medical aspects of my practice. And that was really fostered initially in liberal arts, right? Being able to look at something through various angles and have that curiosity to challenge myself. And I know that each one of you kind of have that skill, and you've built that skill through the liberal arts program. And that establishes that lifelong learning, that capability to always be curious, to always be looking towards the next piece of information that you can use, whether you're within your established career or whether you want to pivot to something maybe adjacent to it. Um, and then, there's networking opportunities that, foster a lot more cultural awareness. I think the networking opportunities is really critical where you're through a liberal arts degree, you're going to be exposed to just different types of practitioners. People come from all walks of life. You could be an artist, a nurse, a business professional, intelligence community. You could be part of the law enforcement community, an attorney. There's just so many areas that's so expansive that if you're really focusing on your network opportunities, which I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit more at the end of what I precisely mean when I say networking opportunities and the ability to actively network, not just passively network. So we can go to the next slide. So this is criminal justice enforcement. I tried to kind of divide these between enforcement, support, advocacy, and administration within the context of the criminal justice field. And you'll see in each one of these slides, I focus on common careers that we all are kind of we know and we're familiar with, as well as careers you might not have thought of that you should take a look into and be exposed to in terms of maybe that's something that you want to engage in. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how do we take that next step once we look at these different types of careers and pivot points that we might have an interest in. So, with common careers, we have law enforcement, probation and parole officer, criminal investigators, youth counselors, correctional officers. These are all about enforcement and support, right? Law enforcement officers, they play a critical role in local, state, and federal agencies. As we progress more in our current society and landscape, there's going to be more police officers. There's more funding. We're expanding criminal justice in a lot of ways to be more, encompassing of different types of support. Traditionally, you had that pathway of, well, I'm going to become a law enforcement officer, but now you have different, subsections of law enforcement officers. You have these beat walkers. You have people that focus on drug interdiction and crime prevention. You have police officers that focus on mental health and actual community response support. So that's something that's kind of interesting developing that career of law enforcement officers. We see that in correctional officers as well. I know here in New Mexico, for example, there was a lawsuit with the big jail here. It's called the Metropolitan Detention Center, and it's a big McClendon lawsuit. You can look it up. But as part of it, they actually became under decree and they were required to do more to support their correctional officers. And we see this happening through different jailing and rehabilitation systems across the United States, where you're not just having a singular type of correctional officer, but you'll have correctional officers that focus in, acute treatment. You have correctional officers that can focus in integration back into the community. So these are things you can look at. Now, with careers you might not have thought of when it comes to criminal justice and enforcement, and I got exposure to a lot of these careers through my time as a criminal defense attorney. One is a forensic science technician. So many criminal cases focus on technicians, specifically within the forensic science department of your respective, jurisdiction, whether that's at a state or municipal level. When you're talking, for example, DUIs, right? Those a lot of times hinge on blood tests when there's refusals, or they hinge on interpretation of data regarding, if you get a case and there is data. A lot of people know that when you're a criminal defendant, you're entitled to that data, which means that the prosecution is going to be hiring those forensic science technicians to come in and testify as to what that data means. It's incredibly important and it's pivotal in the criminal justice system that we have quality forensic science technicians. You can get exposed to that through your liberal arts degree. You can, forensic science is kind of part of that criminal justice process, and you can look at it through qualitative, right? The forensic science from the perspective of its administration, its interpretation, its development over time, its history, and also from the technical aspect, the quantitative aspect, right? So I really advocate for you guys, if especially your criminal justice degrees, and you're looking at how you can use these different types of liberal arts programs. Forensic science technicians, I see a lot of times have liberal arts backgrounds. Liberal victims advocate too. Most prosecutorial agencies in the United States now have victim advocates on staff that do on-scene reporting and responding to domestic violence incidences. I've gotten to know quite a few of them, and they really enjoy their job. And those skills we were kind of talking about that you build through your liberal arts and science degree, that's a great stepping stone to getting into victim advocacy. Being able to orally communicate with your victim and then take that communication in a persuasive way and putting into a writing format that can be used to advocate and defend that victim as they seek justice is really, really important. And the foundation of those skills you build through the liberal arts program. Security manager is another really big one. As we see there, I know people have been paying attention to the news, and it's not really specific to California. You see it in a lot of states. There's been a rise in shoplifting, in embezzlements, and taking away of property, both in corporate businesses as well as family locally owned businesses. And we're also seeing a rise of privatized security management for these companies because it's putting so much, it's taxing so much on the current system that we have for criminal justice enforcement. And so for people that are interested in, law enforcement, but maybe want to take a different route that doesn't necessarily have that physical aspect, that danger aspect, security management is a really great career. And like I said, a huge part of security management is going to be documentation. How do you do that effectively? How do you do that comprehensively in a way that can be used later down the line to advocate and defend for your client? Those are skills that you build through a liberal arts degree. And I see a lot of security managers. I've cross-examined many of them, and a lot of times they have a liberal arts background. Also, insurance and fraud investigator is going to be something that a lot of people don't think about when they think about their liberal arts degree. An insurance fraud investigator is really, really important, especially on the civil side, whenever you're looking at defending an insurance company, or whether you can actually do insurance fraud from a state level. I know New Mexico establishes an insurance fraud agency and department where they look at that and they can actually prosecute their own cases. I've had for example, in New Mexico, an insurance fraud investigator step in as a prosecutor, right? That's an opportunity that a lot of people don't realize that they can have with a liberal arts degree, which means you're going to have to know how to write, you're going to have to know how to communicate, you're going to have to know how to issue spot, to look at things from different perspectives. And insurance fraud, I know a lot of you guys might be thinking, hey, I'm not interested in car insurance. Everything is insurance. There's construction insurance, there's corporate insurance, there's boat insurance, there's road insurance, there's property insurance. Insurance has become this huge market, and you can actually get really, really specific. And that's why, with a liberal arts degree and how it kind of accentuates whatever career field you're working in, you'd be surprised how effective you might be in the role of an insurance fraud investigator, and then how all of those skills you built up with your insurance or with your liberal arts degree and your career that you currently have actually leads you seamlessly into that insurance fraud investigation field. It's incredibly important. It pays very well, and in my opinion, I think it's a growing industry that we're just going to see more of. And then, if we want, we can skip to the advocacy slide, Mackenzie. So, criminal justice advocacy. Everyone thinks about it. I know I did. That's how I became an attorney. These are the common careers you think about: attorney, social worker, legal assistant, or paralegal. These are incredibly important careers. And especially from the attorney side, it's a lot of investment at the outset. That liberal arts degree is required to get into law school. And in my opinion, a liberal arts degree specifically from Excelsior University sets you up well for that. I've talked about it with the people on this call, Mackenzie, Ellen. I know I've you talked Steve Marciano's ear off about it. But the transition from post-COVID, a lot of law schools have shifted a lot of their learning to be, hybrid, whether that's synchronous or asynchronous. And I have found in my experience that a lot of the law students struggled with that adjustment. I didn't. And the reason I didn't was because I went to Excelsior University. I knew how to learn online. I knew how to learn through distance education and how to do that effectively. We're seeing that a lot more, and we're actually seeing a lot more online law degree programs. When I applied to law school in 2019, I believe there was seven ABA certified, American Bar Association certified law schools across the United States. My last check earlier this year was about 21. So we have a threefold increase in the amount of online law degrees that are being offered. I know New Hampshire is a big one. My alma mater, Syracuse University, has a JD Interactive program that allows you to get barred through the New York State. There is some great ones out in Minnesota and the Midwest. They're kind of popping up everywhere. And if anyone here on the call has this inkling, hey, I want to look into the legal field, and I want to look into becoming an attorney, going to law school, I do encourage you to reach out to me. We can have a talk more about next steps for that. But as a criminal defendant, or as a criminal, I wasn't a defendant, but as a criminal defense attorney, I worked a lot with legal assistants, paralegals, and social workers. These are absolutely critical to your practice, and they're quite simply, there's just not enough of them. There's not enough social workers. There's not enough legal assistants and paralegals to do the work that needs to be done. Things are becoming more litigious. There's a little bit of, I would say, I would describe as a little bit of a chaos in the justice system right now, especially with the opioid epidemic that's hit the United States and how criminal justice has tried to deal with that. We're seeing an increase in the need for these types of employment. And as a little like bookmark here, I know some people have heard stuff about, AI and how that's going to replace the legal field. I don't think it will. In my experience, it's actually enhanced social workers and legal assistants and paralegals' ability to produce quicker work product that utilizes data. And so I actually think that with AI, you're going to see actually, more social workers and paralegals be able to do more work and meet that demand that's being put out by our justice system. But there are also careers you might not have thought of in terms of advocacy. One is a policy analyst. And I know that that sounds kind of like vague. What do you mean, a policy analyst? But researching and analyzing policies and legislation related to crime and justice, those are often for the government. I know New York State, for example, out in Albany, hires people as policy analysts for their legislature to look at policy that are being done by other states and other countries, do comparative analysis, utilizing effective issue spotting and quality writing skills to relay that to policymakers. We have that here in New Mexico, and I see that in a lot of other jurisdictions as well. Policy, analysts, I do think that's a great career to pivot into if you really like writing, if you really like getting into the weeds of research and creating products, and we call them white papers that policymakers can use to make important decisions. It's a great career, and it's really streamlessly, or it's streamless in terms of the intersection between your law or your liberal arts and sciences degree and the policy perspective that you can get from that. So I encourage people to look at policy analysts as a future career, criminologists. A lot of people don't realize this, but criminologists are actually really, really important in terms of policy at, agency levels. When I was a criminal defense attorney for the New Mexico law offices of the public defender, it was important for us to reach out to criminologists to look at trends that we're seeing and getting advice of counsel, getting an idea of, hey, we're seeing this thing. Let's talk to this criminologist out in Chicago who studies this and maybe can give us a better, idea as to strategies we can employ. You usually see it from the perspective of, sociology departments, but you can also see, criminology on a private scales through think tanks. I highly encourage people to look at criminology if they're interested in kind of that broader 30,000 foot scale of looking at trends and providing important information to agencies that might need it. There's also community outreach coordinators. Those are really important in terms of engaging with communities to promote crime prevention programs and resources. I often see them mostly through the lens of, libraries and municipal agencies that employ community outreach coordinators. They're really, really important, and I think they're on the rise. Those are some things. And if you guys have interest in any of these things, specifically community outreach coordinator, I encourage you to reach out. I have some connections in that field, and they love their job, and they do a lot of oral advocacy, connection with the community, and actually building up products that can be consumed by the community when actually, perpetuating these programs outwards and getting involvement at a local level. It's really, really important. I also wanted to hit up on one that I thought was really interesting. It's epidemiology in criminal justice, analyzing data and crime trends and their impact on public health. A lot of people don't realize that that's really, really important whenever policies are being made, both at a city scale, municipal level, a state, and a federal level. There is an intersection there between public health and criminal justice. And so I encourage you guys that kind of have that foot in both worlds to look at epidemiology and criminal justice. It's a fascinating field and incredibly useful to agencies at a state and federal level. And if we can switch quickly to criminal justice administration. There we go. So common careers we've all seen, TV, you have a court clerk, a bailiff, data entry specialist with justice administration. These are really important to the actual functioning of our criminal justice system. A, a court is only as good as its clerk, right? A judge really can rely long term on a clerk, and I highly encourage people that are very specific and detail oriented to look at these careers. They help with the actual effectuation of justice and moving it along and preventing, latency that can cause a lot of issues down the line. And I really encourage you guys to look at these types of careers. But there's other careers you might not have thought of when it comes to administration. One is HR. A lot of people don't realize HR is huge in the criminal justice system, especially at a state level. When you have massive agencies with large employment or at a municipal or district level, let's say a district attorney's office, they have HR there. It's really, really important to actually be able to manage all of these human resources that these massive departments have. And a lot of times there's opportunity to not only be within the, human resource management side, but the actual advocacy side of those missions. I know a good friend of mine out here in New Mexico is head of HR for the public defender's office, but actually gets to do a lot in terms of recruitment and getting people into the public defender's office. And so you'd be surprised how expansive that HR field can be within the criminal justice context. Records managers are really important. Believe it or not, that is actually critical to a case. We have something called a chain of custody. You need to have a good records manager. And if that's something that is of interest to you, please reach out and let me know. Grant administrator, a lot of nonprofits are actually funded through grants, and there's even actual agencies that have positions that are grant funded. And being able to be familiar with grants and writing and utilize those skills you built through the liberal arts and sciences degree is a easy transition into grants writing and administration. And we also have case managers. You can get those within the context of social work at a correctional facility. Case managers are incredibly important to the actual administration of justice and being able to look at something, make sure it's on time, and make sure that every party is getting what they need, whether it's the defense, the prosecution, a client, a defendant, a victim. It's really expansive, and I encourage you guys to look at that. Now we'll go to the last slide so we can reserve time for questions. So it's titled Great, What Now? Right? What does all this mean? I have all these skills. You pointed out some careers I might have thought of, I might not have thought of, but how do we actually turn this into something that's meaningful to me, right? So starting with how to find a job or a career, there's something I like to call the funneling method. It's where you use sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, or other job search engines to see what companies are hiring, what markets are active. You go straight to those companies' websites. So I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is they go on to LinkedIn or wherever and they're like, okay, I'm going to start applying. What I really would recommend is to use those as basically just search algorithms. Identify the companies, markets that you want to find, go to their specific website and find someone there, network, contact, and apply through their own portal. If they don't have one, you can email their HR. It's a way more effective way to actually search for job openings and career pivot opportunities than using traditional job search engines. So I'd really recommend that funneling method of starting really wide at the top and then getting specific with, okay, I realize I want to get into epidemiology. I found this organization that's hiring one. And instead of using that search algorithm to do it, just go straight there and contact someone. It's way more effective. And I have found through my professional experience as well as working on the, hiring side that we look at those candidates much more closely. Um, and you're also going to see something here. I put network, network, network. What does networking to you guys actually mean? And I put in something, it's called active versus passive networking. Passive networking is going on LinkedIn and finding someone that's in your career field and just adding them and they're there and you see the content that they create. It's a consumption oriented networking. What I would recommend is active networking, actually starting a dialogue, right? Reaching out to someone, whether it's myself, I know Steve Marciani's on the call, Marciano's on the call, Sam Watkins, Doug Perry. Start a dialogue with them. Be like, hey, I see in your CV and your career that you're doing something I want to do. And I would like to ask you some questions about that. When you made this decision, why did you make that decision? What are some recommendations that you would have? Do you have any markets that you think I should identify in looking for my job search? I encourage each one of you that is on this call today to be more active in your networking and actually establishing meaningful communication. A conversation with two or three people in the career field that you want to enter into is way more valuable than just following 50 content creators or adding a bunch of people on LinkedIn. Having that active relationship with networking is going to be really, really important moving forward. And I have found it's established long-term relationships that I can double back on and, tap into sometimes years after I first made contact. Ways that you can do that, right? I know I mentioned LinkedIn. But utilize your Excelsior University resources. There's Excelsior Connects, which I'll make a plug for right now, which is really handy in terms of figuring out, where are these alumni that we're talking about, and then being able to filter them and say, hey, I see there's this group of alumni that are doing something I want to do. Reach out with them and start those dialogues and conversations. There's also, they have a presence on social media, LinkedIn, going to events like this, and even in-person events. I know multiple times throughout the year, you'll see ads for, Excelsior on the roads, Excelsior Connects. And we actually go out and we talk with you guys, go to these events and talk with people that are working in these fields. You'd be surprised what you run into and maybe opportunities that you can utilize down the line when you're developing your career or you're pivoting your career. And on that note, we have a massive global alumni network. I know we're approaching the 200,000 alumni count. Excelsior University has people everywhere, and I promise you, there is someone somewhere doing something you want to do. And I really recommend identifying them, identifying the job and the career you want to look at, the market you want to work in, and then reaching out and establishing those meaningful connections. And a part of that university resources and this massive global alumni network is the ALC, which I'm a member of. I know Sam on here is, Doug on here is, Steve just recently was a member of the Alumni Leadership Council. This is what we do. We're here to connect you guys, right? Whether it's connecting you with us and establishing maybe some plans and guidelines and approaches towards that career pivot or progression, or pointing in the right direction of someone who might have that information. The ALC is here for you. Whether that's while you're in school, once you've graduated, we can connect you with these types of resources and even foster long-term, dialogue and conversation as you build towards that inevitable career progression or pivot. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about before we got into the Q&A period is imposter syndrome. And I think this is the reason I included it is I identify it as one of the biggest obstacles that people face when they're establishing their network, when they're pivoting a career, when they're really entering into a new space for the first time. And what imposter syndrome is, it's a psychological phenomenon where individuals doubt their accomplishments and you have a persistent fear of being exposed as, a fraud, despite evidence of your competence, right? People experiencing imposter syndrome often attribute their successes to external factors, such as luck or help from others, rather than their own abilities or hard work. And there's a lot of common feelings associated with imposter syndrome. It's self-doubt. We talked about attributing success to external factors, fear of exposure, perfectionism, and overworking. These are all, huge signs of imposter syndrome. And I challenge each one of you to overcome it, to confront it and overcome imposter syndrome. Every single one of us has been in a situation where we kind of feel like we're out of our depth, we're a little bit nervous. And when you can actually overcome that imposter syndrome and establish those dialogues and reach out and be more active and thoughtful in your process of your career development, it really does a lot of dividends. We talk about imposter syndrome a lot in the context of the legal field because you go through this whole rigorous process to become an attorney, and then once you're an attorney, you are now the most junior attorney, a bunch of other attorneys who know everything, and it can be really, almost threatening in a way, and it can make you feel like you're not in the right space or you don't deserve these accolades, when in fact you do. Right? You guys earned your degree from Excelsior University. I have seen the curriculum of other universities. I have traveled a lot, had a lot of dialogue with a lot of different alumni networks. I went to Georgetown, I went to Syracuse, private schools. My wife went to Berkeley, and I'm telling you, there is almost no difference. And I actually think that I trust Excelsior grads more because when you're an Excelsior grad, you sacrifice in order to get that degree. And you really work at the tools of your trade while managing a bunch of other things like your family, your career. These are things that make you better at what you do. And I just wanted to leave you guys with the message that wherever you are, you deserve to be there. And wherever you want to be, you also deserve to be there. So overcoming that imposter syndrome and taking that next step, utilizing Excelsior University resources, utilizing that funneling method with your networking, and actually establishing an active network where you're communicating, starting a dialogue, and utilizing that for your next step. It's going to be really, really important. So that's all I have for you guys. We can go to the questions period. And I just wanted to thank you for coming to this webinar. And I really appreciate every single one of you and what you've accomplished at Excelsior University.
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, we have some time for questions, but I just have to take note of it. So many people saying, thanks and outstanding, Chris. Yes, great presentation. So really, what wonderful presentation. I just want to share that from our chat. I want to get us started with a question right away. And I want to encourage folks that have questions to put them in the Q&A. I know we've got some in the chat. I'm going to go back and forth, but again, it's easier for me to see them in the Q&A. And I just want everyone to be able to see them too. So people will be able to see finished questions there. But I think that this is a really good one from Frank. Mr. Arima, what would you say was the biggest surprise benefit of your liberal arts degree? That's a great way to get started. I love that question, Frank.
Well, thanks, Frank. I think the biggest surprise was, I'm an attorney, right? And the biggest surprise for me from a liberal arts degree was how much your thought process influenced your writing, right? And I always kind of thought of them as separate, like writing was an activity that I did and not an actual, exhibition of the way that I think and the way that I speak. And I learned that through a liberal arts degree, that my writing can be an extension of myself and less of this kind of amorphous work product that's separate of me, but is actual representation of me. And I'm a big writer. I love writing. I'm a bit of a stickler. By the way, if you guys have writing samples you want people to look at, send them to me. I love reading everything and giving critiques and asking questions because I just don't think we can ever stop learning. And I think that no everyone should always strive to become a better writer because it's just so important. You'll hear it a lot of time in the legal community. If it's not in writing, it doesn't matter, right? And I looking back at my time at Excelsior University, the thing I appreciated so much is how much they made me write and how much they made me express my thoughts. And so I encourage each one of you through your liberal arts degree. That's why I kind of talked about building your profile and your portfolio is that build that writing portfolio. Look at what you've written and be able to produce work product to future employers and say, hey, this is what I can do, right? It's really, really important. Great question, Fred.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I'll add to that just from a building your portfolio with your writing samples and all of that. During my degree at Excelsior, we actually had to use and this might be a thing that other degrees are working on, but I know for mine, I got my MBA with Excelsior. There is a website that we had to use to build our portfolio out, and we had to put, some of our major writing and, our major projects in there. So that's a really great resource and something to continue to use after you finish. Even just to look back on the work that you do, I think all of us, we get our degrees and then we're like, all right, on to the next thing. And when you look back at what you've done, I think it really does help to combat what you brought up, that imposter syndrome. Like, look at what you've done. It really is quite the accomplishment, even just to get the degree, all of the work that goes into that. So really good
And,
to look
and
back.
on that point, Mackenzie, you'll see how much you improved too, which is something you can use to market yourself. To be able
Yeah.
to look at like your first writing sample that you did, and then look at your final paper that you did for your bachelor's, and then look at your final paper you did for, and you'll see you can use that. I've used that before where I've had two writing samples, and I showed them. I was like, this is how I actually progressed, and it shows that you're a good investment.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Ellen to ask a question.
Hi, everyone. I have a question here, and I don't know where this person is coming from, but they ask if a liberal arts degree is helpful when trying to launch a new career, or is it too general?
I think it's incredibly helpful, right? Because we call them soft skills, which I think is unfair. They really are hard skills, communication, persuasiveness, effectiveness, the ability to think. In law school, for example, we say this all the time, when the hardest part of law school is you have to change the way that you think, right? And I really, looking back, I started that with Excelsior University and through a liberal arts program, right? How do you identify issues? When you're looking at building a business or starting a new career, where do I need to look for? What certifications do I need? What kind of exposure do I need to different markets? How much information can I utilize to make a good decision here and to create a good business plan moving forward? These are incredibly important, and I think you shouldn't hide from them. The biggest problem I see a lot is people have this liberal arts degree, and for some reason they're not like promoting it. It's a great degree, and I think now more than ever, it's so important because we're seeing what happens when people don't have that like effective thinking process to be able to think critically and analytically and utilize a lot of data to make important decisions. I do not think it's too general at all. And in fact, I would challenge you to challenge that way of viewing it. It's actually an incredibly specific degree, right? A liberal arts degree is a degree that you're actually looking at the way you view the world. You're looking at the way you view data, the way you view writing, yeah, a thoughtful, analytical, not outcome based, but process based approach to communication. That's incredibly specific, and I think transfers across all fields, whether it's health, whether it's law, whether it's, you know, business that's so useful and does you so much, like it actually encourages you and I think builds you up to accomplish what you want to do. So I would say it's not too general. And in fact, I would say a liberal arts degree is quite specific.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. I think that's really insightful and also like fresh perspective on a liberal arts degree and education. Really great for people that are looking into it and also have just received one. Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question in the Q&A, and then we'll pop back over to the chat because I see some of them there. But if people want to keep on adding to the Q&A, that would be great. So our next one is also from another anonymous attendee. And that is an option when you're using Q&A. We can either call you out by name or you can stay anonymous. So it's really up to you. So what are some good strategies that you found, Chris, to combat imposter syndrome? And I know we've talked about it a little bit, but some additional ones, some fun, let's put a little bit more fresh perspective on it.
A big one would be exposure, right? Just cold reaching out to someone and someone you might not even think would respond to you and starting a conversation, just being like, hey, and do the research beforehand. I think that's a big thing about being an active networker is, for instance, when I looked at something I wanted to do, a career I was interested in, I would look at that person, I would pull up their CV, I would go through their resume, I would read the things that they wrote. Something that I would do when I would apply and I would get an interview for the interviewees that would interview me, I would actually go in and I would read the articles and the publications that they wrote. And that way I could, be more responsive and have a better and more in-depth dialogue with them. And you'll actually find how that alleviates so much of your imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome happens when we get in our own head, right? And when we get out of our head, when we get into exposure, when we experience things, when we read, when we come from a place of knowledge and curiosity, I do think it helps overcome that imposter syndrome. Going to events at Excelsior University is another great one. I find it so interesting to meet all these people that come from all these diverse and different backgrounds. And you'll realize everyone there is kind of nervous. Like everyone there thinks that everyone else is the smartest person in the room, and everyone else is this, amazing accomplished person. And these are kind of like little things that you can do to build up for that really big next step, which for me personally was law school. Um, and a lot of other things too that you can utilize, and I'm gonna do a plug for it. I think finding someone that you trust to talk to, right? A sane voice in the room, because I'm as neurotic as anybody gets. I actually think neurosis is an important quality to be a good attorney. The problem is that it weaponizes you against yourself, and you start doubting all these things. But having a good trusted network that you can talk to, that'll be like, hey, they'll be like, Chris, that's dumb. Like you shouldn't think that. That's absolutely ridiculous. And they read off all these things that I've done, or we'll go through the thought process. So I also think having a good support network and people that you trust, that could be the ALC. Having someone that you don't think is biased, that can you can talk to and be like, hey, hey Doug, hey Steve, hey Sam, hey Chris. If you have time, could I talk to you about this thing? And you'll realize pretty quickly that imposter syndrome truly is in your own head.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. I think that's a great idea too. Talking to other people, really just like harning in on, on connecting. I feel like that's really important too. And I know you spoke about that when we were talking about networking earlier in your site about, furthering your career. Just talking to other people is really eye-opening in that area. I have a couple of questions from the chat that I think are a little bit more specific to us. So I'm going to grab those. So earlier on, someone had asked if there was going to be a recording of this. Yes, there is. We are currently recording. Hello. We are going to share the full recording with all of our attendees and our registrants for this event, probably a week or so from now. So it gives us some time to cut, the beginning and the end, and then to get a link for you. So this will be shared so you can watch it in its entirety again and take notes or whatever you want. But yes, we will be sharing a recording of this with everyone. The other question, I'm just popping through, was about, will we have other webinars like this? We would like to have other webinars like this. Someone had asked, Lorelei had asked if we could do one about the animal science field, which I think is very interesting and something that we will absolutely take note of. and probably look into for the future. But we are thinking about expanding this beyond the books type of webinar into a series where we can kind of explore different fields and how a liberal arts education can be applicable to those. So thank you so much for asking, Lorelei, and thank you to everyone that's on the call that's expressed interest in this event. It's really great to be able to focus on our specific programs and the specific fields that they impact with people that are experts in those fields. We had a question about the LSAT. I'm going to let Ellen take that one for you, Chris.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mackenzie. I'm just going to pull that up. So bear with me for a minute, everyone, because I think it is a good question.
Yeah.
Chris, we had a question from Ajo about how much time you spent studying for the LSAT and when did you find out that you wanted to become an attorney? So those are two excellent questions about your career path.
So for the first question, I'm going to preface this with do as I say, not as I do. I spent very little time studying for the LSAT. I had just kind of gotten done with my time in the military, and I really wanted to change up my life. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to take the LSAT and see what happens. So I walked in there cold. I took my LSAT in March, which I don't recommend doing that. You want to take your LSAT earlier. And it's that way you can be, more open to the application cycle, so you're not past any deadlines. By that time, most people's deadlines had closed. But I got my LSATs back in June or in April, and then I applied to Syracuse University in May, and then I was enrolled in June. So it was actually a pretty quick turnaround. Now, what you should do, and I'd recommend this, is I would actually recommend, and it's a little bit different now because I do believe the LSAT got rid of the logic game section, which was, I think, everyone's bane and also not particularly indicative of whether you're going to be a good attorney or not, confusing logic games. So I would recommend a prep if you can afford it. I just think it's, you'll hear a lot during the law school application cycle if that's something you're interested in about a holistic approach to applications. Law schools, they're looking at the totality of the person who's applying. And in large part, that's just not true. Law schools take in because the way that they're ranked is going to be based off of the GPA and the LSAT scores of the future attendees of the law school. So law schools are incentivized to get people with higher LSAT scores in order to get better rankings from the World News rankings. So what that means is if you have a good LSAT score and a good GPA, you're going to get into the law school. And there's a resources that you can look at that'll show you kind of like where the range is in terms of each law school and based off of your LSAT score and what your likelihood of getting accepted in is. I will say it really boils down to the LSAT and to the GPA. And that's why I recommend taking a prep because that's how important it is. That LSAT can really, if you have an okay GPA, that LSAT will, choose your fate, so to speak. And if you have a great GPA and a bad LSAT, that LSAT can take you out of candidacy for certain law schools. So I'd recommend that and reach out. If any of you on the call have an interest in law, I highly encourage you to reach out to me. We can talk a little bit more about specifics and things that you should look at. I think that it's a very, the application itself is going to be contingent on your LSAT score, whereas what you want to do, the careers you want to be interested in, the markets that you want to enter, that is going to be incredibly complex and involves a very holistic approach towards the schools that you might want to choose, right? Because, for example, if you want to really get into cutting edge prosecution, but you want to work in Oregon, those might not be particularly compatible. Whereas I think the most progressive and the most cutting edge prosecutor agencies are in LA or, the Bronx, for instance, and the Manhattan DAs. And in criminal defense, for example, the best criminal defense agencies, Washington, D.C., New Orleans. So, then I would recommend going to schools around those areas. So you could get introduced into those networks. So that was my long-winded way of saying, it's a little bit complex with the LSAT. I do recommend taking a course, but if you want to really get into the weeds of the markets that you want to enter, the career you want to have, then I would encourage you to reach out to me. In terms of when I first knew I wanted to become a lawyer, uh, my mom would say when I was 7 years old, because I really love to argue. But I would actually say it was when I was at Excelsior University, Excelsior College at the time. And I realized how much I love writing and how much I love advocating through my writing, which I enjoy every day. Matter of fact, I'm gonna get off this call and I have to finish a brief on writing for a client. I love writing. And so to me, that was a very natural progression. I love to, advocate for people and to point out holes in people's arguments. So it was very natural to me. And I also wanted my voice to matter, and that's why I went to law school. But if my career has taught me anything, it's that your voice matters. And whether you're a criminologist, whether you're a law enforcement officer, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a nurse, a liberal arts degree helps you elevate and promote that voice, right? And so, I would just encourage you guys to really believe in the voice that you have and your ability to communicate effectively and persuasively.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chris. And at this time, I do not see any other questions. So we'll just take a few minutes to kind of wrap up and chit chat. But do you have a question?
Mackenzie, can I make one more thing from the ALC?
Absolutely. Take your time. Absolutely.
For those still on the call, we mentioned it, hey, we're thinking about doing more Beyond the Books programs. If there is programming you want, reach out to the ALC. You can go on to Excelsior University or just Google Excelsior University ALC, and you can find our contact information there. And you can reach out to Mackenzie, Ellen, Jamie Hicks-Furgang, and say, hey, these are programs that I want. These are things that I'm interested in. And, that gives us the opportunity to not create stuff from scratch. We can just give you what you want and desire. So I encourage you to have a more active, correspondence relationship with the university, as well as the ALC, because we love this feedback. If you guys want stuff, tell us, and we'll do whatever we can to make it happen. So I just wanted to add that in that the ALC it's based off of service to you guys. And so if you guys want something, let us know and we'll do our best to make it happen. And even if we can't, then I'll just call you and talk your ear off for an hour and it'll be the equivalent of a webinar.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, I actually put some really great links for people to kind of learn more about what our team, Ellen, me, and as Chris mentioned, our supervisor, Jamie Hicks-Furgang, who is wonderful and great. Some of the things that we do and the ways that we can kind of program and connect with our grads and our alumni. But in addition to that, I put our team's email. So it's alumni@excelsior.edu if you want to reach out to us personally. Or if you've got something specific for the ALC, they also have an email and all of those emails will go to them directly. So that is alc@excelsior.edu. So that's a great way to connect with them. That's a great way to ask Chris more questions. Chris, if you've got an email or anything or a link that you'd like for people to have to connect, I definitely encourage you to put that in the chat. My email is mwright@excelsior.edu. If you want to connect with me, I'll put that in the chat as well. And then I also put some links for Excelsior Connects earlier up there, but they're also there as well in this big one with all those links. I do want to plug, we have an Excelsior Connects on the road event coming up in January. So for folks that are in the DMV area, we will be coming to Baltimore on January 8th. We are so excited. That event is going to be 6 to 8 p.m. More details will follow if you're in that general area, but it'll also be on social media. So we've gone all over the country. We've been to Texas, we've been to Florida, we've been to Chicago. This is our second time coming to the DMV area. So we're so excited and we're looking for more places to come and to connect. Those events have members of the ALC at them, members of our team, and then the Board of Trustees and Excelsior's leadership. So our president and our provost. So we're so excited. Those are always a great opportunity to connect. It's our newer series, our newer in-person event series. But it's been really great to be able to meet people in person and get to chit chat with them. So we hope if you're in that area and around on that day that you can join us. We also have an event coming up on December 5th, which is going to be hosted by Dwayne Hanford, which is going to be about what do you do after you've been promoted. and you're in a new leadership role. So Dwayne Hanford has done some of our previous organizational leadership focused webinars. So we are so excited for that one. It'll be great. And I'm going to send it over to Ellen to share a little bit about our Stamp the Map initiative.
Thanks, Mackenzie. And I am just going to put in a plug. We have some military veterans on the webinar with us, and we are so grateful for their service. Our Stamp the Map campaign is going to benefit our retired and active military folks who are in need of scholarship and financial assistance to attend Excelsior. Our Stamp the Map appeal, which you'll hear about on social media and through your emails, asks people to make gifts to the Stamp the Map campaign. And our goal is to have at least one, hopefully more, gifts from every state and hopefully some territories on our map. We are really hoping to light up our entire map. And again, gifts to that campaign support our military folks and our veterans. So please don't delete that or scroll by it. Give it a read. Spread the word to your friends and fellow grads. We want to, as I said, stamp the map. So thank you very much. Thanks, Mackenzie. And thank you, Chris, for a great webinar.
And as a veteran, I was a beneficiary of a lot of these programs. So I highly encourage you guys. And I want you guys to know when you give to Excelsior University, students receive that benefit. This is not like some, to challenge my alma mater, Syracuse University. It's not going into some sort of like billion-dollar fund that the students never see. And the next thing, a whole new building pops up that, its only purpose is to serve coffee. That's not Excelsior. And the benefits that students get from these programs are direct. And so I really encourage you guys to give back if you can.
Oh, thank you both so much. Yes, all of our gifts go back to our students. And November has been our month to recognize our military and veteran community. So thank you so much to our military and our veterans. We really appreciate you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Have a wonderful evening. A recording of this will be sent out to you. So thanks again. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ellen. Have a great night.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
Oh, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It was wonderful talking.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.